Are you an investigative professional? Did you know you can find the best private investigator resources using investigatorstoolbox.com? This resource community was built exclusively for licensed investigators and investigative professionals. You can network directly with members, educate yourself through free webinars and blogs, and even create your own customizable research library. Membership starts for as little as 49 cents a day. Download the Investigator's Toolbox app or visit our webpage at www.investigators-toolbox.com.
Is a good case management system keeping you from taking your business to the next level? Crosstracks is the premier case management system for the investigative community. They're the only SOC 2 certified case management software available. Visit crosstracks.com, tell them you're a listener, and save even more. Get a plan in place for the new year to grow your business to the next level.
I want to talk to everybody today about ScopeNow.com. ScopeNow has been a big-time sponsor of this program for quite some time, and I just love their service. I've been using them since the beginning. I'm one of their beta customers, and it's been so awesome to see them grow into the business that they are today, and just how they just keep reinventing themselves and pushing themselves to get more and more information. What it comes down to is ScopeNow is a tool that you definitely need to use if you do social media investigations, any internet research, and really spending less time digging around and looking for information. I think is one of the best points of how ScopeNow can help you. Their AI platform, their analytics are amazing. You really get an idea of what you need. You're reducing the time, you're reducing the manpower that you're spending on doing this research, because they're essentially doing it for you, and they're doing it correctly, which is most important. One of the new things that they're actually offering is this flagging system where you can flag behaviors and really highlight and look out for fraud. If you're doing a lot of fraud research, this is a fantastic tool, and you can set up alerts. So you have particular people that you're looking at, you can actually set up alerts to get notifications when the criteria that you set up is actually is flagged and goes off. It's really, really amazing. And their relationship and association analytics are top notch, really cutting edge and really, really cool. When they brought that out on version 3, it was a game changer. I mean, really being able to see how people interact together and having that relationship, analysis is really, really something that's cool. One of the other things about being involved with ScopeNow is their ability to offer webinars. Their team is cutting edge on putting together and getting out really, really great content. If you're a member of ScopeNow, if you know who they are, you've seen them around on LinkedIn, you'll know that they're constantly doing webinars on these new websites that are coming out, and they're really staying on top of it. And don't forget, any reports that you generate, you can actually white label those reports and put your own logos on and really make them look professional, which could equate to more billing for you as well. So check them out today. It's www.scopenow.com. They're a great, great company. They should be one of the tools in your toolbox, along with whatever kind of search engines you do. You need to make sure that ScopeNow is a part of that suite. Scopenow.com.
Congrats to our host, Matt Spaier. He was named Investigator of the Year by PI Magazine for 2021. You can get a copy of this great issue at pimagazine.com. Welcome to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. Today, we're talking about wrongful death investigations. Celebrated New York attorney David Oddo joins the program to give us an update on the state of trials post-COVID and to discuss wrongful death cases. Let's get right to the guys and jump into this topic. Please welcome David Oddo and your host, private investigator Matt Spaier.
And welcome everybody to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. This is your host, Matt Spaier. We got attorneys again this week, and I'm not apologizing about it because we've got some great topics to talk about. I got my friend David Oddo here. David, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matt. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It seems like I have been having some attorneys on recently, but we got stuff to talk about, and I wanted to check in with you because you just finished a trial, a month-long trial, right? So tell me what's been going on with you.
Yeah, that in this age of COVID, this new world of ours, it was a very interesting experience. And I don't know, for you to imagine lawyers trying cases in masks and having jurors in masks and witnesses testifying in masks. It was quite the ride. The protocols that we had to follow during, throughout the trial really made it 2 trials in one.
Right.
It took twice as long to do everything. There was a lot of technology involved, which is something that we were prepared for, and we knew that was the way we would have to do it, with the courtroom being so spread out, with jurors all over the courtroom, as opposed to being confined to that the jury box. So we needed, a number of television screens throughout the courtroom to project the evidence, many documents in the case, photographs and things like that. Right. So the technology was really important. The mindset, to be mindful of the fact that you really had to speak loudly and clearly so the court reporter can take down everything you said, it was really quite the experience. However, I will tell you that it did not change much about how you went about the trial. I think it took a little bit longer to connect with jurors under those conditions, but it's doable, and it works. And it was able, the jury was able to come to a reasonable verdict and a good verdict in the case. And to my surprise, I think the biggest takeaway was that the 6 jurors and 5 alternates, they showed up every day.
That's great.
They were on time every day, and they made it. And we had assumed that wasn't going to be the case, but it worked.
So nobody got sick during the 1 month?
No.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, right before, I guess the Omicron variant outbreak probably happened towards the end of the trial. Maybe
it was before. It was quite a bit after. Yeah,
Oh, really?
we finished in mid-November, and I think it wasn't until December where things started to get a little heavier.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So you had to wear a mask the whole time that you were making your arguments, huh?
You had to wear a mask as soon as you walked into the courthouse. Couldn't take it off until you left, and
So like an airplane. Pretty much, you're trying to case on an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
It's a great way to put it. I'm going to use that because that's what it was.
It's yours, buddy. You can have it. So yeah, very, very interesting. And just how that whole process played out. It's so great to see that the juries actually took it serious on that. How did the pool work? In getting folks in to actually, they get called for jury duty. It used to be everybody was piled into this big room and there was no air conditioning and it was like miserable. And I'm sure that wasn't the case, having the ventilation issues. What did that look like as far as, getting juries in for you to actually voir dire and sit down and pick?
It's a great question, because that was something I was wondering about when we started. Mm-hmm. The way they handle it is they bring in a very, very small panel for that particular case. So each day there will only be between 17 and maybe 25 jurors who will be in the courthouse for that particular case. And this way they could manage it. They could bring in 10, 12, 15 jurors at a time in a big courtroom, spread them out,
right,
and then leave the remainder in the hallway spread out.
Wow.
And there, you're right. So you got to remember, there's now in the courthouse, you don't have lawyers and litigants walking around anymore. The hallways are empty.
Right.
So there is plenty of room for that. So that's how it worked. It was really doable because of the small numbers of jurors that they would bring in.
So did you have was there change to the amount of people that you could preclude from being involved on that, or you still had the same number of challenges and all that?
Yeah, everything stayed the same challenges, same procedure. Everything was really, back to normal as far as that goes.
Right.
The only difference was you did have to deal with a few COVID worries from potential jurors.
Right.
Either they may have had a elderly parent or a relative at home. They may be caring for someone who may have comorbidities. So you had a few of that, but again, not as many as I anticipated.
So those are questions that you got to ask, right? When you're questioning somebody, right?
You have to
be
ask.
here every day, right?
You have to ask.
Wow, interesting. The thought crossed my mind as we're chatting about all this stuff, and to me, I'm thinking of it as the investigator, or what kind of services, how do I get in on this and all that. And one of the things that was very popular before COVID shut everything down, it was just starting to really gain some teeth, was doing the juror research.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like maybe in this situation where it's not as fast paced, you're taking more time, there's actually a better chance of you to do a profile on somebody you're looking at. And I wonder if that's going to pick back up again, and folks are really going to start focusing on trying to get profiles on who their potential jurors are going to be.
100%, Matt. You hit it on the head. The time, because you did have more time, it was much, much easier, more comfortable to do those searches.
Yeah.
So that really was something that stuck out to me as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like almost you're not getting a sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, of the judge even like pushing you along. It's like, it's going to take what it's going to take. I feel like the whole world just kind of kicked it back a few notches on how quickly we used to move with things. Right.
And the court staff, everybody understands.
Yeah.
The key I found to an efficient trial is the judge, and we had a fantastic judge in Queens, move the case along, no wasted time, really did a nice job of accommodating everybody.
Yeah.
And the second person who's most important is the court officer, because they're the ones moving the jurors back and forth. They're the ones who are keeping control and making sure masks are on in the courtroom, right, and that protocols are being followed. So if you have, you're going to have a good judge and you have a solid court officer, it's going to work.
Well, that's the good news. The bad news is it's still going to take forever to get all these cases tried. Like what used to take a long time isn't going to take a really long time to get them done. But that's reality. I think that pushes towards mediation and folks really taking a consideration when an offer is on the table, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, very interesting. It's so fascinating to see that, people with that real push to try and get back to normal, right? Just, being a little kinder, trying to get things going. I have been, my office space in Manhattan, I share with an attorney, and, I've got to listen to some depositions, because he's doing a lot of video depositions, and man, the whole demeanor of the deposition is 1000% different than it used to be sitting in a court reporting office, right? Where it was very professional, starched white shirt, like everything was by the book, and people were nasty to one another and this and that. And now it's just, there's some joking going on. People are more relaxed. They're getting through things. And one of the most interesting things that I noticed was they're taking breaks for phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're in their office and an important phone call comes in. Maybe it's a call they've been waiting from a carrier for settlement. And they say, excuse me, I just need 2 minutes. Let me just take this. Can we take a 2-minute break? Nobody's saying no. Now you try and pull that garbage at a court reporting office. That was never going to happen.
No.
Right. How dare you look at your phone while we're doing this stuff.
Right. And to that point, I was in the middle of of deposing a doctor on a medical malpractice case. And as she's testifying, I'm watching this cat. She's in her living room and I'm watching this cat, and it's slowly going from her left to her right behind her neck. And she was wearing it almost like a scarf. And
DeVille, nice.
Yeah. And it was quite interesting. And I've had witnesses take breaks to go feed the dog, to, they had a package coming at the door, and it's very, very different.
Yeah, this is the world we live in, but I kind of like it. Like I don't think so. Things like that may not go back. And in fact, the governor just signed the law to allow notaries to be done online, right? So
which is really important. That was really important. That was an important law.
Yeah, I think that one and the insurance carriers having to turn over, the information on policies in a timely fashion. Those are the two really big ones that I think just came across, and that's good for everybody.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, maybe the notary thing is not so good for the investigator, but hopefully we'll still get work out of it. But and the greater good. So you've written a book, and I want to get into that and talk about what it is and what you wrote it for, the purpose, and when we're going to take a break here, and when we come back, I really want to dive into that and talk about the investigator's role and what you'll be talking about too. So everybody sit tight, and we'll be right back.
In 2019, Investigation Education Consultants added a new affiliate in its never-ending quest to provide quality professional investigative training. IEC is now offering certificate courses and investigative training online. Our website, iecoit.com, will soon offer a certificate in professional investigation for those interested in entering the investigative field. There'll be standalone investigation classes for those seeking continuing education credits, CEUs, or just interested in taking classes for their own personal or professional interests. The classes currently available are Foundations of Investigation, Legal Investigation, Criminal Investigation, Fraud Investigation, Background Investigation, Interviews and Statements, Skip Tracing Locates, Ethics, and Report Writing. Investigator Toolbox members will receive a 20% discount off the listed price. So visit iecoit.com. Satellite Investigations is the premier investigation resource in New York State. Founder Matthew Spaier was named PI Magazine's Investigator of the Year. If you need investigative assistance in New York State, visit their site at satellitepi.com. Get results, not excuses. Registration is open for the next NALI virtual conference. This event takes place on February 11th. Speakers include Marissa Shalin, Nicole Boker-Gray, Marcy Phelps, Patricia Fisher, Brian Chase, and Michelle Stewart. Learn more at nali.com, nali.com.
And welcome back to PI Perspectives. This is Matt Spaier, your host. Today we are joined by David Oddo. David, I want to welcome you back to the program.
Thanks. Having a good time.
Yeah, it's great catching up with you and just hearing about this whole trial experience and, what it's like getting back on the saddle. We're all interested in whatever it is we do here to get back to normal. So that's good stuff. But you wrote a book. So tell me a little bit about the book and let's dive into it.
I wrote a book for my clients. I wanted to answer some questions in a different kind of way, because for decades, I've been having to explain to my clients in wrongful death actions where a loved one of theirs had been killed as the result of someone else's negligence, whether it was an automobile case, whether it was through medical malpractice, whether it was through a work-related incident. And I've had to have very unpleasant conversations explaining the law in New York State. And in New York State, the law values life only to the extent that you made money.
Right.
So, in other words, your life doesn't have a value. You only have a pecuniary or economic value to your life. So, that being said, if you're a wage earner, a very high wage earner, and you were unfortunately killed as the result of someone's negligence, your surviving spouse and children would be entitled to those economic damages.
Right.
However, in the cases of, and even in that case, that's only economic damages. The wife, the children, the family are not entitled to their loss, their grief, the loss of just having a husband or a wife, the loss of having a father, and the loss of having a child and watching that child grow. There is no recovery for that. And it is an antiquated law that dates back to the mid 1800s, pre-Civil War,
Right.
that arose out of child exploitation laws that are no longer relevant and really don't apply to our society or to even our sense of intrinsic fairness, right? Because New York is one of literally a handful of states that don't recognize that a life has a value. So I wrote this book because I've had occasion to sit down with a family who lost a 6-year-old who was run down by a careless driver and killed, and to explain that other than whatever pain and suffering that child may have suffered immediately prior to them passing, that their life doesn't have value under New York law. And it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. It's horrible. And I wanted to try to explain that and go through that for the clients in writing and in a book. And I wanted to use examples of those things, and I wanted to sort of make them understand that it is unfair and unjust, and that it is something that if they do care about, they should contact a legislator here in New York.
So why do you think that hasn't been changed? You think it's all politics and just insurance companies lobbying?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, there's this fallacy that this is going to create more cases somehow and more litigation. And not only is that not supported by any evidence or any facts of any kind, it's just dead wrong.
Yeah.
And what it does is, look, our civil justice system is based upon holding people accountable for the harm they cause. Okay, that's a basic tenet of our civil justice system.
The backbone of it, really.
Yeah, and think about it. If you're not accountable for, like we see it with elderly clients, where I've seen cases where hospitals have, I'm going to say, neglected elderly patients who they're just not a priority, and this encourages that kind of behavior if there's no value to those lives.
Right. Yeah, it's really scary, and you do see that negligence on all different types of cases. And one of the things that we talked about earlier offline before we started recording is the investigator's role in trying to connect the dots, especially on conscious pain and suffering, and how important that is because of these archaic laws that are here, basically the rules that we have to play by. How to get over that hump, and even coming down and doing what we call intakes, so that initial sign up and having conversations with people about supplemental underinsured motorist coverage, which is something they don't really think about, right? Not having enough coverage. I remember there was an instance where I had met with somebody. We were reviewing their insurance policy, and they had the minimum, which in New York State, 25,000, 50,000, meaning 25,000 per person, up to 50,000 per accident. And I distinctly remember having a conversation with the guy, like, hey, this is low coverage. You should really talk to your carrier and improve that. It's not that much more expensive. Maybe it'll cost you another $100 a year, look into it. And the guy didn't do it. And then sure enough, 2 or 3 years later, I met him for a horrific accident where he lost limbs. And he still had that 25 policy, and the person that hit him was a student driver, and it wasn't a driving school. She was driving her parents' car, and they had a terrible policy as well. And it is what it is. So let's talk a little bit about that, the relation of an investigator to wrongful death cases. What's been your experience?
Yeah, in those cases where you're trying to prove that there was conscious pain and suffering prior to the death. And you need to quantify that. The lawyer's job is to quantify that so that you can maximize the recovery, for your client for the pain and suffering. So how do you do that? I had a situation where, I'll just use an example, where a client had gotten into an accident on a highway, had gotten out of the car, inspecting the damage while she was on the shoulder, and another car came and slammed into her. And the initial reports were that she was dead on arrival and that had died instantaneously from the crash. We needed to send out an investigator to find the first responders, the people who were first on the scene, whether it was, and in that particular case, it wasn't a first responder. It was actually, our investigator was able to find a Good Samaritan who had pulled over and had witnessed right after it, had witnessed my client moving, my client gasping for air, my
up and down. Yep.
Yeah. So, that was done. It wasn't the type of thing where, you send an investigator, he just, speaks to someone. Oh yeah, John Doe, was there at the scene. This takes a lot of digging, and it takes, sort of looking at the police reports, looking at the officers' memo books, because sometimes there'll be something in the memo book, or something in the memo or the notes of the EMT or the paramedics or whoever got there first, and you need to do that. So, and I'm sure you've had experience with that.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about some of the challenges there in that, because there are so many, right? So challenge number one, a lot of times we're not getting that call until a year in, and you realize that all right, let's say you've tracked down an EMT. I want to talk to you about an accident a year ago when somebody died. The guy's like, yeah, pal, I deal with that 8 times a day. I'm not going to remember your specific accident 1 year later. I'm sorry. I'd love to help you, but I can't. That's assuming they'll talk to you. So most of the times it's challenge number 2 is getting them to actually talk to you, because there is a policy with all these EMTs, especially FDNY. You don't talk to anybody unless there's a subpoena, right? So then it's a matter of, you're going to get that subpoena. Please keep notes. This is important because, once you get that subpoena, now, we can have a conversation and talk about this stuff. So that is another challenge. Reverse engineering 911 reports is a great way to find eyewitnesses, right? You get, especially it's a high impact accident, you'll get a lot of people that are calling. I remember there's a tree case on the Jackie Robinson Parkway, where they had fallen on a car and a guy ended up getting paralyzed. And I had about 20 people that called, and I had a reverse engineer go back and interview every single one of them. And I got some really good information from those people. And if somebody called 911, there's a pretty good chance they're going to talk to you about what happened. If they're kind enough to actually do the right thing and pick up a phone and call, like, the odds are that they want to tell a story. They want to give you their version of what happened, right? And a trained investigator, someone who's skilled, knows the right questions to ask to really jar the memory and really get the specific items that you need. Now we're talking about conscious pain and suffering, to be able to know how to ask those right questions. So I had a case also in Manhattan down by Chinatown where an Asian elderly couple was crossing in a crosswalk. I think it was either by the Manhattan Bridge. I think it was Manhattan Bridge, right? So it was one of these dollar bus companies, right? It was making a left-hand turn to go into Brooklyn, and they mowed the people down. So there was a guy that was behind them who happened to be a celebrity chef of all things, right? So I had to go to this guy's restaurant and basically chat with him about signing a statement to what he saw and why it was so important, because these people were both killed pretty much instantly. But what was most important was the look on their faces before that bus knocked him down. So the eyes and the hands up and the oh my God, what's going to happen here is what made the case, because although they were killed relatively instantly, they knew they were dying. They knew this was it.
It's that fear of impending death.
Right. And that was enough to get this case over the hump of having the case. Right. So this guy was a star witness. Now, the other biggest challenge I had, he's a celebrity chef. What time does he have to give a statement? This guy actually happened to be very cool, and his restaurant was really good, and I ate there many times after. So it was great. I had another one out on Long Island too, and I've got hundreds of these, but another one that really comes to mind was probably one of the toughest statements I've ever taken in my life, where there was an elderly lady who was making a left-hand turn into a nursery off of Jericho Turnpike to go buy some plants. And there was a gentleman who was riding a motorcycle. He wasn't speeding. He was doing about 35 miles an hour. It was a nice Sunday. He was going out for a drive. She made a left-hand turn in front of him, and he hit the car, flew over the hood into a telephone pole. And I had a direct eyewitness who came up to the guy as he was on the ground and was having a conversation with him for about 4 or 5 minutes, trying to keep him conscious. And the guy's telling me like, oh, I took his wallet out. I'm showing him pictures of his kids, trying to keep him awake. And I'm trying to like not bawl my eyes out. I mean, it's just, like, amazing. And this guy's like, I saw the life go out of his eyes. He goes, something I'll never forget, and it's just like, how do you, I'm like, this is probably the best witness ever for a case, like this is a really, really like gut wrenching stuff, and I got this incredible statement that was recorded. So you got the inflection of what this guy was saying. And then I took a written one after it. And I don't know whatever happened with that case, but I'm sure they did the right thing, the insurance company, and settled. And it was a horrible thing. And this guy, he had family, and he's just, out for a motorcycle ride today and gone tomorrow. Right.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. It's so important. I mean, just here today, gone tomorrow in these cases, you just never know. And it's so unfortunate. And, there are times I'm sitting down with people doing that initial intake, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, they don't have it. They're not going to be able to get what they need. And you talk about having that conversation with them. That's not on me. That's on you, Dan. Like, I don't have those conversations. I'm just like, I'm going to turn everything over to the attorney. But man, I know, and you just see the heartbreak and all that, and you just know it's going to be what it's going to be. So I commend you for writing that book. That's it's helpful. It helps with the grieving process too, right? I think.
Yeah, it does. I think so. I think it also, you want to, when someone's going through this trauma, of losing a loved one, you want to make their life easier. Like you want to have the least amount of questions. You want them to know what's going to happen. And one of the things that surprises people too, when you tell them that, two things. One, because your loved one has passed, they have no standing to bring a lawsuit. There's no one to bring a lawsuit until we have you appointed through the courts. So they're saying, what do you mean I have to go through another? And yes, you have to go through the surrogate court. You have to be appointed, and then you could proceed with the case. The second thing, which comes as a surprise, and I try to explain all this early on in the book to the client, is that any settlement of the case or any major action that takes place in the case has to be approved by the surrogate court.
Yep.
So there's oversight by the surrogate court whenever, there's a case that involves someone who has passed away, to look out for those interests. So if I can eliminate those things and I could put them at ease and be comfortable with the process, I think it goes a long way. And I think it goes a long way to helping them deal with it.
Yeah, it's an absolute game changer. I always, when I deal with those types of cases, take my time. I really just try and, have a conversation with people about what the legal process is, what the expectations are going forward, because, a lot of times the shock is still there, right? You're meeting with somebody because the attorneys want the case yesterday, right? So these folks are still grieving. They're still kind of dealing with things. The shock is still there, you know. So I think having the book is great because, you know, that will subside. And they're like, oh man, I remember this guy Dave talking to me about something, but I honestly, like, all I could think about was my husband or my wife, you know, and no longer being here. And what was that? And now having this tangible thing to go back and like, oh, okay, right, this is where we are and what we're doing. It's great. That's a really.
Well, I can tell you to that point again. You make a good point. And in December, right before the new year, I got a call from a client, a grown adult son, and the wife of the deceased on a medical malpractice case, and they hadn't even buried the father or the husband yet, and they were so upset with what had happened. They wanted some answers, and I said, look, you need time to grieve. You need time to just take care of the arrangements, do what you have to do. After the new year, go onto my website and download a free downloadable copy of the book.
Right.
And I want you to look at it. And then when you're ready, give me a call. And I got the call early in the week, thanking me for that book, you know, and it's easy to read. It's concise. It's short. It's really what I explain to clients in my office. I put into print.
Yeah.
You know, basically what it is.
Yeah. And, you know, it's just, you know, the bullet points of what, you know, what's going to happen, how this is going to proceed. I mean, I think is really important. You know, these wrongful death cases they're so difficult because there is that expectation for justice too, right? So that's the other thing that you got to throw in there. Why isn't the person who caused my spouse or my child to die, why are they not in jail?
Mm-hmm.
Why are there not criminal charges, right? So they think of it as a criminal way, not civilly, you know, of getting, you know, monetary damages. They're not thinking about that. They want their justice. Oh, I don't care about the money. I want this person to rot in jail. And it's like, well, if the DA is not going to press charges on things, there's really not much you can do there. You know?
And then you take it a step further as the case progresses. They say, how come they're not? Why are they not settling the case? Right. They know what they did. You know, they know they did this to my, you know, husband, spouse, child, whatever. Why are they not admitting it? You know, and it's very difficult.
And it's like, yeah, they admit it, but they're going to give you, you know, 50 grand. The value of your case is $1 million, right? So,
right.
You know, you got to get around that hump. I mean, there are many, many challenges here and many things to consider. And, you know, even people's like where they are in their life, you know, as far as, you know, settlement offers, you know, can they hold out and get more, or are they really, really desperate at this time? Did they borrow money on the case? You know, it's the other thing too, right? Now the clock is ticking with interest. So, you know, definitely things to consider.
Especially with the COVID, the last couple of years have really been so devastating to a lot of people, of my clients who have been, you know, their lives have been turned upside down through a very catastrophic injury, you know, from a catastrophic injury. And all of a sudden COVID hits, and either, you know, they lose a job, spouse loses a job, they're not able to work as a result of their injuries. And now the case is going to take 2 extra years. And what do? They have to borrow money sometimes, or they try to hold on, or they become very desperate. And it is really, really hard to watch. That's
a challenge. So the other thing I want to talk about with regards to the investigator and these types of cases, you know, really understanding what your role as an investigator and not being afraid to have a communication with the attorney that hires you over to the things that you think that should be done on the case. Because a lot of times I don't think the attorneys are really thinking about like everything that could be done, right? And as an investigator, knowing the different options that you have, the services that you can go out and offer, I think is really important. It's a good way to build your business, right? Upsell and you know, on the business side, make some money, but it's also being thorough and making sure that the attorney's doing their role and you're handling your role as the investigator is something to really understand. And the other thing also is to take your time on these cases. Don't ever rush through. Pay the respect to the deceased and really just take the extra time to go through and make sure that you're doing everything you possibly can do.
Yeah, for sure. There are many things where I'll be thinking through what has to be done on a case, and I want to get it done immediately. But the investigator, even on cases you and I have worked on where I didn't even know you had certain resources. I didn't even know you had the ability to do certain things. And unless I know that, so that communication is really, really, really important.
Yeah, it's something we've really been preaching the past year or so, as far as like methodology and really having almost like a check sheet as you approach investigative work and understanding, everything that you can do on things, and having those conversations with your attorney client. Hey, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, and I can do that, because it does spur those things. Not only does it keep you organized, but it also lets your client know that we can do these things later on. One of the other things too is excess policy searches, right? Umbrella searches, things like that. A lot of attorneys don't know that investigators can do that. Like, we have resources legally that we can go and get that information. Nobody's breaking any laws or anything like that. They're just, an insurance company puts an affidavit in front of you saying, oh, the client says that they don't have any other insurance policies. But okay, did the insurance company explain to their client why they're signing that document, or did they just mail it to them and say, sign this, get it notarized, and get it back to us, right?
Sure.
Because that happens a lot too. So to be able to check on that stuff is important. And then also you have your post judgment, where you've gotten a judgment on something and you're trying to collect on it, right? We got to go find some assets. Being able to do that, and the pre-judgment asset searches are important too, right? Convincing your client to take that settlement offer. Hey, really, there's nothing else out there, that we can take a look at, and we really strongly suggest that you take that. So these are tools that, the average attorney may not know that are available through using an investigator. So
yeah, and just as you again to your good point here, the investigator, just like our expert in a medical malpractice case, should be involved from the very beginning. So as the investigator, you have a role from the intake all the way through post judgment. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's actual soup to nuts, right?
Yeah, really.
In some cases, and I think it's underutilized, and I'll be the first to admit I underutilize.
No judgment.
The investigator pre-deposition.
Yeah.
Before I depose a witness.
Yeah.
Why am I not, as a routine, which I should be doing? I mean, I do it in certain cases, but a lot of times we're dealing with people on the medical malpractice end whose everything's pretty public. The doctor, let's say I'm deposing a doctor in a medical malpractice case, any disciplinary actions, anything like that is going to be contained in something I can find. But on the lay witnesses, it's something that every lawyer should consider.
So to your point there, yes, there's a lot of that information on your professional witness on, where they went to school, what their background is, and all that. But there's so much more, though. Mm-hmm. Really, like if you dig into it, and I don't do it, but I know people that do really extensive backgrounds on these expert witnesses, and they give you like how many times they testified for, against, different arguments. I mean, I've seen people pull up articles that were counter to the argument that this guy was making, this particular thing. It's like, oh, well, you're saying that it'll always be this way, but you published an article, or your doctorate that you published is something completely different. It's like you have those things that do happen. And, I think what attorneys need to understand is, yes, you can go and do that, or you can have your assistant go and do that. But you're also trying cases. Your assistant is getting your bill of particulars together or drafting this and that. Are they really focusing and honing in on doing this? And I'm not saying it's right for every case, but if you've got those big verdict cases, there's almost a fiduciary responsibility, in my opinion, to take those routes and go and do everything you possibly can to make sure everything's done. But I do also understand on the smaller cases, it's a juggling game too, because that case may only be a $25,000 case if that's got the minimum policy, right? Or the, the numbers can't be there. I received a phone call from a guy yesterday, and he's like, "Oh, we spoke a few months ago for you to do witness statements. And I know I held off, and I really shouldn't have held off, but I wanted to wait till I got a declaration from the insurance company to see what the policy is. And now can you do this stuff?" And I was like, well, the good news is, yes, I can do it. The bad news for you is my rates went up in January. So here's my new rate list. So it is what it is, right? Well, David, this has been really great, man. It's been so great to catching up with you. You do a podcast yourself. That's fantastic. The trial brief. I know you said you're getting back on the horse with that too, and I'm looking forward to checking out some new episodes there. But how do folks get a hold of you if they have any more questions?
You could always go to my website, to the law firm website, which is Oddo and Babbitt. Well, the website address is oddobabbitt.com.
ODDO, by the way.
ODDO, yes. My phone number, 212-642-0950. And you could actually download a copy of the medical malpractice and wrongful death book on the website now, if you're so inclined. So, but thank you, Matt. It is always a pleasure, and I love being on with you. And
yeah. So folks, this is a guy that loves the law, that lives the law. He gave up a whole year of his life to be the president of the Trial Lawyers Association. There aren't many people you meet that have a passion for being an advocate for people, but David, you're definitely one of those people that do it, and I admire it. And I love that even after you've got your term done, you're still, banging things out and making sure that folks are not being taken advantage of. So I commend you for that, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Matt.
Definitely. All right. So thanks everyone for tuning in. And I promise next week we're not going to have any lawyers. We'll go back to regular shows. I can't make that promise, but thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch everyone on the next show. Take care.
Thanks to David for coming on to give us an update on the state of trials in New York courts. It is encouraging that we keep pressing to return to normal. We also want to thank Crosstrack, Scope Now Investigation Education Consultants, Satellite Investigations, and Nally for sponsoring the show. So please support our great supporters. Have you thought about joining Investigators Toolbox? Now's the time to get on board and join the fastest growing digital community for investigative professionals. Use code PIP 201836 to save 10% on membership. If you have a question or a comment about the show, email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com. You can also find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. We'd like your feedback to bring you the best shows possible. And we'll be back next week with a new show. So make sure you tune in and stay safe out there.